All right. Thank you for coming. This is our second workshop about virtual production and its applications in corporate, live, broadcast, any kind of production. So today's panel, thank you so much. Today's panel is going to focus on what's called image-based lighting. Image-based lighting is a new way of using lighting fixtures to illuminate subjects in a virtual production environment with LED volume. It has the capacity of sending a light that's a little more natural, especially with skin tones for illuminating people. I think it's really important to do a rendering of an image that is faithful to the human eye. Right? If anything is distorted, if skin tones don't render properly, then just like a good friend of mine, a cinematographer, ASC cinematographer, says if there's no suspension of disbelief, then there's no illusion. Right? This is an illusion. We're creating an illusion, the illusion that we're placing people into a 3D environment that they actually immersed in. So, so this new technique, that came from actually another application that Tucker is going to explain to us in a few minutes. It's being used now more widely than in the past to improve the level of immersion that we feel in virtual production. So let me introduce my guest. All of them here are good friends of mine, so this is a circle of friends. Ritchie from Fuse Technical Group, Tucker from Raw Visual, and Alex from Lightsail VR. So I'm gonna ask them to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of the set of tasks and responsibilities that they fill in their respective organizations, and then we'll ask the first question.
Yeah, hello, thanks everyone. Fuse Technical Group is a big rental company and system integrator. We put on some big shows, the U2 concert at the Sphere right now, that's our stage in there. We were in there fixing some color at the end, right before it opened as well. We do a lot of virtual production, and I'm the director of R&D, so problem solving all of the stuff that is not working, mostly interoperability. So this panel is actually quite a lot where I'm focusing lately, interacting or interoperating between cameras and displays, which were not traditionally meant to work together, and we're going to touch on that later in the panel. So thank you.
I'm Tucker Downs. I'm from Raw Visual, which is an LED panel manufacturer. We make LED panels that are used on Mandalorian and Star Trek and a bunch of CES booths and all the big concerts in the world. And my role with the organization is really very future thinking and road mapping new technology trends. I come from a more academic background and have specialized in color science and image quality. So my wonderful co-panelists have much more on-the-ground experience than me, and I think you'll see throughout the talk where each of our perspectives comes in and provides some benefit or some knowledge about the trends in virtual production. So thank you very much.
I'm Alex Pearce. I have a company called Lightsail VR. Lightsail, mostly half of the company focuses on virtual reality. We shoot a lot for Meta, 360 and 180 VR. I sort of focus on a completely different vertical inside the company, virtual production, CG, visual effects using Unreal, and similar live effects, which is a software I like to use. And my title I gave myself is Creative Technologist because I love doing interesting stuff with technology. I love working with smart people like these guys up here. I love working with Michel, and I like to find problems and then solve them. So we'll get in a little bit more of how that is in a practical use case later, but that's a little bit about me.
Okay, so question for the audience. Who has heard of image-based lighting before this panel? Yeah, expected over there. Okay, so the clicker doesn't work, so I think you're going to be the clicker as well as a presenter. So,
great.
There you go.
So who amongst those think that you can define image-based lighting? No volunteers? Okay. Some small volunteers. I won't take your definitions. I'm sorry to tease you like that, but I'll give you 3 definitions. And With these, I don't mean to say that any of these definitions it was a total setup, yeah. I'll give you 3 definitions, but with any of these, I don't mean to say that one of these definitions is better than the other, but through history, this term's been used in several different ways. And they're all somewhat related, and I think by specifying these 3 definitions and then thinking about the relationships between them, that reveals something about what we're trying to do. So the first definition that I've chosen here, IBL as VFX and CGI. So this was kind of the first usage of the term image-based lighting, and I think many people, especially here in Silicon Valley and especially in a lot of VFX research, will be most familiar with this definition, where in the late 90s and early 2000s, the use of 360-degree imagery to provide diffuse lighting and ray-traced computer-generated imaging really changed the way that all computer graphics would be done for the foreseeable future and created much more realistic lighting environments where the light in a CGI image, just like in life, doesn't just come from one source. It also comes from the reflection from the wall or the light filtering through the leaves. And in the late 90s and 2000s, that came out in CGI. So what I've shown here is from Paul Debovic's light stage projects in the early 2000s. This particular slide comes from 2002. And on the left side, we have a 360-degree image of a particular scene. We have a video plate from the same scene, or a still plate from the same scene. A performer inside of a performance capture volume. She's surrounded by many small point sources, and each of those point sources is providing some lighting extracted from that 360-degree image. And then this is being composited into the final image. So this combines the global illumination, that would be maybe what you would think of in the first image, with performance capture and realistic lighting and later compositing. So this is in the VFX sphere. Then we have what I think is emerging as kind of the current definition, and in my opinion, probably the most useful in conversation definition of image-based lighting, where we're using the same type of imagery and image assets to control traditional lighting rigs. So if you have a rig of sky panels or a rig of bars, to control that in a way that aligns well with your source material, your image material, and your later VFX material, you'll get better image composites. So that's very similar to the first definition, but as you can see in this picture, they're not doing any compositing. They have a small LED wall in the background that's providing their first composite with their background imagery.
I was actually the VFX supervisor for that.
Oh, great. Do you want to share more, or?
No, I think you did a great job.
And then lastly, there's this, some people would have tried to force IBL to mean this, and I don't think that they're wrong to be doing so, but in this example, we're talking about image-based lighting as an image asset on a much larger scale and a much larger LED volume with much fewer traditional lighting fixtures, although not zero traditional lighting fixtures, as I'm sure Alex will explain. So this is a picture of a very large stage that was taken down but was located in Vancouver. And they can produce assets here that are the inside of a Star Trek ship or an alien planet. And in this way, just like the first definition, they're getting the diffuse lighting map from their 2D image asset. All of that subtle lighting, the lighting that reflects off of the walls or comes from the floor, is here in this environment and is in the performance space. Because you have a large performance volume, you get a really immersive performance capture, which is very useful for the performers and the director. You gain a creative moment back when you start to combine. Instead of doing everything in post, let's do it now, let's do it in the volume, and let's have it composited in the camera. That's been the benefit here, but there's a lot of issues here as well, where this rig doesn't have as much of a practical lighting rig as the second slide. And so really, I think image-based lighting means all 3 of these things. I think breaking it into these 3 applications, we can learn something from history and we can learn something from the relationships between them. And that's the definition of image-based lighting. So that was my big thing to share with you. So, and now I'll let Alex explain some more examples of great, definitions are cool, but like, what do you do? What do you do with that information?
Yeah. Cool. So it's a picture of me to take a note from.
I did that before. You stole
Yeah,
that
yeah.
from
I
me.
stole that from Michel. Yeah, this is that same stage from before. So this is Quasar Science had a stage in downtown Los Angeles, no longer there. But we'll show a few more examples. But you can see the lighting fixtures on the left and the right. You can sort of make out trees. So the image is being mapped onto these lights. The lights are lighting the talent. And this is from, these next few still images are from a LinkedIn article / YouTube video you can go find online. The clickbait title is On-Set versus Virtual Production. But yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide. But essentially what we did is a good friend of mine, Matt Ryan, is a great cinematographer. And we went on location. We shot an actual scene at sunset with all the pressures of magic hour. We only have like 30 minutes to capture this. Go to the next slide. And at the same time, I shot a high-end 360 video capture from the exact same position, camera position that we had the red camera at for all the different, for the master, for the close-ups, for the mediums. So we shot those 360 plates. Then we brought those back on a different day. We came into the stage. We projected those plates onto the wall, and we also, if you go to the next one, we also projected that same image, and again, it's 360, so the same image is being projected onto those lights that you see on the right, on the ceiling, on the left, and so the lighting is very, very, very similar to how it actually was on location. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to tell, but this is the outline of those trees from that plate, and having the actual light and on the other side we had the sun source. For one, it makes things much faster to light. If you have this setup that we had there, you could, and I shot a whole music video just by myself doing 100% of the virtual production and all the lighting and everything. Just a friend of mine that just went in and we shot a whole music video because you get a lot of this lighting sort of for free.
And his Indian card was taken away from this.
But you get more realistic lighting. It becomes really important for things like reflections and everything. What's the next one? Yeah. And then this is just an example. So this is from the software I like to use a lot. It's called Assimilate Live Effects. So this is how I'm mapping the fixtures. So in the program, I'm able to sample from the viewport and say I want the ceiling to be sampled from here, the left to be sampled from here, the right to be sampled from here. And then inside of there, I can also exaggerate saturation, or in these particular fixtures, in the Quasar Science fixtures, you can have specific LUTs applied. You can also have different color spaces, and you can further tweak things if you want to change the Kelvin. You can change all those things either from the fixture level on the computer. You can change the fixture, or through the software. Yeah. So the test was amazing. So we shot it right around Halloween, and we basically shot on location. Then we shot the same exact thing on the stage, and then we gave it to an editor who cut it together, from both of them. And I don't even know which ones were shot where. It was like I'm not sure if we shot that on location or if we shot it in the studio. So it was a very powerful test. A big part of that, and this is true for all VFX work, a big part of something that looks real or something that looks fake is the lighting, is the color, is like how does this, whether it's green screen or LED, does the color match the background and the person, and a lot of that is the DP. Even outside of image-based lighting, otherwise, you have to have the eye to be able to light and the same contrast ratios, and there's a lot of challenges that come with all of this, technical challenges and otherwise. But it was a really successful test, and it was a lot of fun to put in practice. We had talked about it. Tim Kang and I had talked about doing this, and other people have done similar things. But it was very cool to put it in practice and see the pros and cons, because we were only there for a few hours on the stage, but we could have been there all day if we needed to be. Whereas when we were on location, we had to get it and get out. There was no time for like, and if we would have come back the next day, it would have been a completely different sunset. So it's no like, oh, well, let's just come back tomorrow. We would have to reshoot the whole thing because the inconsistencies would just not work. So, let's see. Yeah, and so this is a slide that this TV isn't doing it much justice, but
somebody forgot to adjust the television, get it calibrated, and.
But this was when we were in the studio. We had the monitor from the shoot that we did a few days before, and then we had the live feed, and it was really amazing to sit there and look and go, wait, which one is which? I think this one looks more real than the on location. On location looks fake now that I'm looking at it. It's like it was a really interesting test, but yeah, I think that the technology has gotten easier and easier, and will continue to get easier. More lighting companies are going to come to the forefront of being able to do pixel mapping. There's also LED manufacturers who are making, they're having more spectrum in their panels. They're having, like you have RGBW panels, and the end goal is it's just another tool in the tool chest. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use it, but I think especially as it becomes easier to use, more cinematographers or more studios start integrating image-based lighting, I think it's going to increase production value right away. And I think getting the color and the contrast ratios to match in real time, I think is going to be it's going to be really important as we move forward in this in virtual production.
And the studio that you have here wasn't a particularly large or $100 million facility.
Yeah.
So what was the key to succeeding in that environment?
Great question. There's probably a few answers there, but definitely, we pushed our limits there several times. That probably a little too far. But I think the key for this one was it was really all about the lighting, and for us, we were specifically picking projects that, hey, let's do music videos. We did do a few little short films, and we did some case study type tests and whatever. But for me, it was the slide that you shared actually was a great example of it was this like sci-fi motorcycle music video, and the lighting was the content was very dynamic. There's like blue star field, going this way, and then red, and then it would change colors, and that was something that would have been very difficult to pull off with green screen. It would have been very difficult to pull off without image-based lighting, to get all the reflections on the motorcycle and on the actor's face who had specific face paint. So we tried to be selective of the projects we would take on. And we tried to find projects that either would be challenging to do outside of having an image-based lighting volume, or ones that we just thought were interesting.
Cool.
Question for the group. How much adoption are you seeing in projects or deployments that you go through on a regular basis of people who understand the value of IBL and decide to implement it? Question for you mostly is, since you're probably one of the biggest installers of LED volumes in the country, what do you see, and who's interested in IBL? Is it mostly on media and entertainment? Is it for live events? What's the ratio of adoption that you see in the field?
I mean, that's a good question. It's a bit of a loaded question, but certainly any volume is an image-based light just due to the wraparound nature of it, but so is any enormous screen. So there is light coming from all over the place, and I think as Tucker mentioned, once you've got enough of it, once your screen's bigger than this and it's the size of your room, it is influencing that environment. And so something to pull back for you guys is that is a corporate event. That's a corporate event, that's a keynote, that's a product launch, anything where there's a big stage, that is causing some of these effects. And so as we'll see a little later in some of the slides, that light, even though this is meant to be a display and it's meant to be viewed by your eyes, it's also one of the biggest light sources in the room, and we're going to see the implications of that later on. So yep.
The light is, it's all around us, unfortunately. It doesn't come from one direction. The biggest light that we encounter every day is the sky, not the sun. It's a lot bigger than the sun. The sun's like just this little tiny useless point in the sky. So everything else is filling all that light in. And even in this room, I worked on a project. I was working with some architects on a project where they were installing some, this has nothing to do with LED screens now, but they were installing some lighting projects and doing lighting design for a fashion design studio. And they had decided to paint one of the walls a key color. And they had also put all of the design desks and drawing desks against that wall. And about a year later, all the artists had to move to the other side of the studio, and they had to rebuild and relocate all the changing rooms and racks to the beautiful design space, because the light coming from the wall was really affecting their design process. So that's in real life. And then when we do something, when we want to control that, in CGI, it was artificially controlled. And now we want to do things where we want to control that physically in a real space, so we can have real performance capture, but we need all of the same kind of accuracy and subtlety that you would get from any interior finished space. So,
yeah, and I think for the corporate community, that exists here in Silicon Valley, I think it's really important to understand that the way you use a volume and image-based lighting is something that depends on your creative direction. It is you decide how to use such an environment to create the illusion that you need to create. And that can be about launching a product. That can be about putting your CEO in a space that he isn't. That could be for a futuristic sort of environment that you need to promote. That could be for educational environments, where you actually teach, your audience to actually learn about something. So there are a lot of applications, that where the immersive nature of this technology is really creating the illusion where your audience forgets that they're not looking at something that is not real. It feels real for them, and all of a sudden, the one thing I was mentioning before, the suspension of disbelief, once that's gone, then your mind is ready to accept what you're looking at. And when you accept what you're looking at, all of a sudden, the communication exists. Your storytelling tool is actually working. So just like Alex was saying, this is just another tool, at our disposal to create something. But I think it's important to realize that at the beginning, at the onset, it is really you as individuals who have to create the environment that you want to place your projects in for this to work. It is not, we're going to put this together and it's going to work. That's not the way that it works. It's the other way around. It's creativity dictates technology, not technology at the head of the creativity. If you do that, it fails. Then it becomes an exercise in style or an exercise in technology, and then it does not have the rendered effect. The one question that I have for the panel is really about scalability, and I think it's really important for people to understand there are still a few things to look at. If you say, I want to start small and then I want to scale up, what are, and that's important for people in this community who do not have the Netflix and the Mandalorian budgets like we were talking in the previous panel. It's not necessarily feasible. It's not at our disposal. So what are the pitfalls that you see? What are the aspects of the technology that still needs to evolve, where you could say, I can start small today and I can scale up tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, from a lighting perspective, I think even fairly basic lights all have DMX integrations now, and using software like Assimilate, you can integrate with that infrastructure fairly straightforwardly. So you can start with a fairly small number of just traditional lighting fixtures and have a very sparse pixel map. It can be 5 fixtures, but still create that. And especially if there's moving content, I think one of the things we haven't shown here in these are all stills, but having that light moving across the space, across those pixels, or flashing, and just having a fake fireplace, like that's pretty low resolution.
Who are these guys?
Two of our colleagues that unfortunately aren't here today, Ben and Tim are both at Aperture Lighting now, and they're also very good speakers and experts on image-based lighting.
They would be telling you the truth about image-based lighting.
Yes, they would.
But like what you're saying, in starting small, right? This is a very small grid of fixtures and actually an LED wall back behind them. And so they bought a small LED wall, have a small array of fixtures, and have created this immersive capture that if you were a corporate speaker coming into this space to speak, seeing it there, knowing that it's real and interactive, in our experience and what I've seen, gives people a lot of confidence. And standing in a working space like this is way, way more convincing that you're on another planet than you think.
Yeah, and I think for your on-screen talent, whoever they are, I think the sense of being there really exists. And I come from a visual effects background, and I've done so much green screen and blue screen that my eyes are burned from the two colors. I'm like colorblind, but it really is an essential aspect of conveying. The realism of it is really about your on-screen talent, the people who are talking to the camera, believe that they're in the environment that they're in. And I think that's critical, for make them act, make them react, make them feel like they're in the space that they need to be in. So it's just something not to be neglected, is the fact that performance, however you want to call it performance, whether it's a sales performance, whether it's an acting performance, whether it's an art performance, it is really important for people who are in this environment to feel like they're really there, and that gives that illusion to them.
You guys do an amazing job of being an illusion of an audience right now.
You have some slides, don't you? Should we share?
No, this isn't a grid of, it's 5 lighting fixtures. They were called quasar rainbow tubes. They're about 2.5 feet wide. They have 16 pixels in them. They got a little bit of aluminum extrusion track, put them together on a grid, plugged in DMX cables, and ran it through Assimilate. That's what he was talking about. So there's actually a pretty reasonable chance you have some of this equipment already in your inventory that you could be toying with and experimenting with. The only thing that this shot has that might be unique for a lot of people is that those trees in the background are an LED wall.
So that's what?
Did we skip it? Doesn't Ritchie
Did you
have
have something
slides,
else? There was something else?
There's lots of slides.
We can skip
Okay.
those ones and come back.
We have
Okay.
2.5 minutes.
All right.
So the conversation can't continue. Yeah, I got to get out. So yeah, I got to get out in about 2 minutes. So the last thing I want to say, which is what I said in the previous panel, is feasibility. Is it attainable for a corporate company who does not have the large budget? This is a reasonable sized wall with image-based lighting. As you can see, this is the same quasar tubes that have been mentioned in the past. This is actually a collaboration with Alex and Tim, who you saw in the video. And this is our booth at NAB 2023. This is a small wall, I think 18 by 10. So this is very manageable. And we're able to actually create the illusion of having this little robot being completely immersed in this environment with projecting the image-based lighting content that Alex was mapping on his software into the 3 or 4 fixtures that we had. There were reflections from the ceiling and reflections being sent to the subject from the left and right. I want to show you another slide before I go. So this is SIMTI recently in October in LA. So this is a single person in front of a very small LED wall with a lighting fixture. And then this is the result. So it's incredibly believable that this guy was there. And it's 8 feet by 6 feet or 6 by 8 in a 15 by 15 space with literally one single computer, one single light, and
one day of load-in,
and 4 hours of setup. Yeah. So that's what this is.
There are so many people that I would love for you to talk to that can give you a price. I think Ritchie is allowed to discuss the pricing. I'm not. So, are you even allowed to discuss pricing?
I can discuss pricing anytime.
Come see us after.
All right.
There was a moire issue that you have to worry about?
Yes.
You have a Moray issue because he didn't genlock his phone manually.
Yeah, I might see this. The genlock feature in this guy doesn't work. So
The short answer is yes. It's something you need to be aware of. With a cinema camera where you can really control the depth of field, normally you push that screen distance out of focus just a little bit. And that
and the way to alleviate that is in a number of ways. Number one, you have to understand depth of field in general. You have to understand exposure. So again, we go back to lighting. You have to understand the subject distance to the wall, subject distance to the camera, and we never had this. We didn't have this issue. The moire that you saw, just like Eric said, is really my phone. Actually captured the moire because the sensor is too small and I have no depth of field.
There are all of the lens manufacturers are doing a lot of research in moire reduction right now, and applying particularly interesting lens elements that have a very complicated effect on the depth of field that helps resolve moire. Unfortunately, even with all of the cool optical advances they're making, it's always going to be somewhat of an issue. It'll always be around and always be planned for.
You familiar with Nyquist's theorem? So if you more than double the resolution of your screen relative to the area that your sensor is currently capturing, then you have a chance of doing that. But this screen technology is not there yet to out-resolve the sensors. The sensors are going up in resolution. It's an arms race, right? So if you have moved to an 8K sensor, now you're going to have to push your screen resolution up even further. New moderator.
New moderator.
You guys just don't want to stop, so go.
Yeah, it's the same guy. If you look at the angular resolution of your camera sensor, and basically if your LEDs are smaller than that, or if your LEDs are approximately the same size, then you'll always have moire, always. Same as if you look at two chain link fences in the distance. Same as if you look at a field of posts as you drive by through the Central Valley, or field of trees.
From your Miata window.
Through your Miata.
On the example before, for 60 capture, in that shoot, was there camera movement or not? Did you not actually have 3D environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. He's asking if there was if there's any camera movement in the shoot we did before, because it was a 360 plate, which is obviously it was video, but it was captured from a still position. The short answer is there was some slight movement, both on location and on in the studio, but very slight, very subtle.
A decent VFX house can pop enough separation into a 2D plate to let you move your studio camera around the position of where you took your plate from by a bit. So you get some ability to roam there, and that's a fairly established process. So yeah,
there's a lot of research in depth estimation using AI, the term, and Kubrick is particularly good at that as well. And so there's 2D, 2.5D, and 3D shoots, or I might use different numbers sometimes.
According to her, it's 2.75.
2.75. All right, I like that.
New one for me.
How do you get manage the sound reflections because there's so many flat surfaces?
Sound reflections is a real issue, especially the more encompassing the stage. So there's a SMPTE white paper out there that you can take a look at, but it is definitely a challenge.
Lots of baffles and just careful control, but a lot of ADR.
We were using a group called ZR Screens, which is what Mandalorian uses. It's kind of like furniture pads that they put up. And it's funny, the guy's like, well, can't we just cover the whole thing? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
That thing was way more expensive than your thing, buddy.
Serious.
There's also some post-processing AI stuff I've seen to try to remove sound reflections. I haven't personally experimented with it, but I've heard positive initial experiments.
So we shot on the Amazon stage in Culver City, and I think that has one of the greatest echoes that I have tested because it's such an encompassing place. We were able to keep all but 90% of the original audio, even though we had kids running around screaming and yelling. So we just had to apply the approaches. And again, that paper was released both by us at ETC and by SMPTE and Eric over at Moses now.
Yeah, Eric Rigney, if you know that name, he can help you with all sound-related volume stuff.
In a smaller stage too, or in something that would be, you know, a corporate PR space or corporate communication space where you don't have really 360 degrees of solid walls and ceiling, then you have a lot less of an issue to worry about.
Much less. Yeah. Question.
It's the best green screen you've ever seen in your life.
Who paid you to ask that question? Was it Alex?
No, you're asking, like, using the LED wall or just the lighting? Yeah, no, actually.
For sure.
So, yeah, absolutely. You know, definitely using image-based lighting with green screen is really, it's really amazing. And, you know, obviously now, even outside of the software I use, Live Effects, there's other software that you can comp live, you know, so you can see what it looks like. So being able to get the lighting on, especially if you're doing like car process, green screen or otherwise, it's crucial to be able to get the reflections, the lighting, and you can also, you know, it's pretty easy to just take out the green. So if you have, you know, some kind of crazy interactive lighting coming from Times Square, you can also just desaturate the greens coming from the lighting, so you don't accidentally, you know, put green light on, you know, and you might not even see it if it's just, you know, then you get into post or otherwise and you go, oh, oops. So yeah, no, it's absolutely, image-based lighting is almost more important for green screen.
That's almost essentially what this line of work from Paul Debovic turned into. So he would have performance capture spheres like this and then composite onto another motion capture performance that happened in a green space, and then composite with VFX. So, and the image-based lighting portion of that is the only thing that makes that composite possible. It's the only thing that makes it feel like that performance was recorded in the same environment as the VFX.
And his paper on the magenta work is really good. It was done in Australia recently. We're going to be testing it here, most likely coming up pretty soon. But we did the same test as you guys did with Paul, where we did inside, outside, then brought it back to a stage and did all that work as well. And that's where the Hawaiian shirt comes from, Eric Rigney again.
I left for a few minutes. I don't know if you covered this, but in post-production, if you're doing any kind of color grade, what kind of issues are you having with lighting, particularly that with the LED screens? Are you having any issues?
We covered all that. Sorry. No,
It's a good question.
I'm kidding.
Don't burn your LUT in.
No,
So yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, because you know I'm a lighting person as well. For many years, I like to light for the moment, and post was always like, oh my god, color grading and stuff. It's not an art anymore, but now it's getting back to the art of lighting through post production as well. But now with production, LED wall is another art form. You know, so I'm trying to figure out: are you using DaVinci? Are you using what are you color grading with? How's that working?
I could give a whole hour talk just on this one question, but I'll give Alex and Ritchie a chance to address it first.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, I think in general, if you're shooting LED, hopefully you're doing at least 90% of your work on set. So you really need to be able to live grade and get very close to what you need to do. Absolutely. Are people still doing post color grading? Yeah, definitely. And they're just using whatever tools. Yeah, a lot of people use DaVinci. But the regular tools can apply. It's just then you're power windowing or you're masking out, and it's definitely I don't see that ever changing, just because just naturally in post you want to every frame go through, I want to fix this and fix this and fix this. But my thinking is that in general you really should be doing that on the day. Most of that work should be on the day. You should have a colorist that you trust. Basically, you should be bringing Company 3 into the day, not like doing it at the end.
And always look at the hero monitor.
Sorry?
Yeah, you're definitely capturing as much as you can. I think Tucker set up this image. You're trying to do as much of the technical grade on the day and then the creative grade in post. So if you want that creative tone, whatever across your film or something, you're going to do that in post. But what this is illustrating specifically in these environments, this each person here is lit on one side with the LED wall wrapped around, which is not a spectrally full light currently, and on the other side with a spectrally full light. This cylinder, which is a neutral reflector, looks pretty much the same on both sides, but you can see that each person looks a little sunburned or some color problem. Lobstery. And so this is where we're getting into, these are the current problem, or things that we're working on at the cutting edge of this technology, where we're trying to balance between the wall and the lighting that's coming in the environment, and stuff like this is really hard to grade out. Like Alex is saying, you're spending a lot of time basically power windowing or rotoing your grade. But if we, and Tucker, I'm setting him up for this, can improve the color of the wall, then we get a more holistic color in the space that's technically graded closer to what you're after, and then again, you're just back to that creative grade.
If only one of the premium vendors will make
If
an
only.
RGB WW.
If only.
If only.
Well, we don't make WW.
Oh, sorry.
We make RGBW. There's another company that does WW, and there might be something else on the way.
All right, Shane?
Picking up on this thing, you could also, there's also, I don't know the name of the software, but could you not also offset the frame rate and to generate a green screen back in there? Then
Yes, it'd be Ghost.
and deliver to posts for that easier green screen. You have to rotor that out.
Yeah.
Just doing a green screen for
Frame remapping or Ghost.
That's the same, within the same instance. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so with
Jeremy there can
I will
explain
address-
Jeremy can answer that.
I will
Where's
address
Jeremy?
all of the above, and I'll try to do it very, very quickly. Okay, so point one, the theory of virtual production, the theory of this technology is that we're creating an artificially controlled, real lighting environment. There's no difference between shooting a shot in this room as there is in an LED volume, if all of the light is correct. We're just trying to control it artificially. That's the idea. So coming from a lighting background, you're well equipped to work in virtual production. Now, that's a great theory, but it doesn't really work because of problems like this, where RGBs aren't particularly good LED lighting sources. So there are RGBW, RGBWW, and other RGB plus other colors products coming to the market, and this addresses, so what is happening in this video, this is shot on the show floor at NAB last year, filming a table with a bunch of stuff, and if you imagine these might be key brand colors or a performer or something else, I'm just toggling, the LED ceiling in this example has RGBW pixels and 5mm pitch. And in that environment, if I toggle it, if we're in RGB, all of the reds are oversaturated, the oranges and the red net that they're in, you have what I call hue collapse. And a lot of these issues are actually theoretically and truly impossible to fix mathematically. You might be able to get close, but the truth is you cannot undo this problem. In RGBW, where we have a more spectrally full light, we suddenly get a lot of that correct tonality back. So that's RGBW. And then the next thing that was mentioned is talking about what's available if you have really, really incredibly high frame rates available to you. So if you can run an LED wall at 144 frames per second, or maybe 700 frames per second, and you can insert slices of time where you have some green or some magenta, which balance out to neutral, and then film that with a secondary witness camera, then that's your composite data. That's your rotoscoping data. Then you have another set of time where you're actually filming your content and your in-camera composite footage, and then you can go back and you have your green screen data that you can roto out, or you can replace a shot if there was a technology failure, et cetera. And this technology is available in sort of two different ways. There's, from one processing company, is called frame remapping, which has some limitations. And then from another processing company, they have a camera mode that enables incredibly high, like 700 frames per second, potentially on some products. And you can do this type of insertion and deletion of witness frames.
At the end of the day, though, all of that requires a camera to something calibration. You kind of need to know, you need to match the light source and however many channels it has and its spectral pattern to the camera sensitivity spectral pattern as well, and be able to compensate for that. So if you wanted to do that toggling and say, I'm going to change the background to a certain mix to appear correct, a grade of sorts, and then have the light on the foreground appear correct, you do need a calibration step in there to kind of set all of that up.
Hours and hours and hours of talking on this topic.
That's another very active area of development right now. All the camera companies are starting to get into that and provide that functionality.
So on this green screen experiment, this paper came out and made a lot of headlines, and then people were like, what a joke. Oh, I could never shoot like that. I would be blind. But the thing that they miss is that the wall in that paper is being run at 144 frames per second. It was powered by megapixel Helios LED processing. And then they were replaced, because it's flickering back and forth between those two balanced colors, the actual experience in the studio is that you're in a gray, net neutral studio. There's a little bit of aberration with the, oh man, this screen, you're right, really is. But there's a little bit of aberration in her hand where she's holding that Coca-Cola bottle and moving it. But otherwise, it was a very natural experience for the performer in that experiment.
But when you drop below that frame rate, it gets a little Wang Chungy.
Yeah, that would be a good way to put it.
Is there a method to matching the color space of the camera and the wall, like the blacks to be accurate and all that stuff?
These should have been at the beginning.
Do you want to talk about every single place in the pipeline it can go wrong? Just really quickly.
There are tools available.
The contrasts aren't the same before that.
Yeah, so there's tools to calibrate the wall, then calibrate the camera to the wall. OpenVPCal is a project that's coming out of Netflix. It should have a public release this spring. Wall calibration, Tucker and I are working on as well, how to evaluate that. So with Eric as well through the ETC, we put out a report last year about how different LED panels behave relative to their inputs, and so you can do essentially again a grade or a LUT or something, a corrective LUT again. It's it's a technical one, not a creative one, to offset, and so you're basically reshaping the response of the display to make it as neutral as possible, and then matching the camera to that as well.
What's the GitHub address? Is it something simple? I can't remember off the top of my head.
TJDCS something.
Okay.
Come see us after if you want to look
all
at
of the camera companies are developing their own software to also manage this problem. So if you're working with one of the major camera companies and call them and say, hey, I want to try this, I want help, they will help you solve that problem.
Yeah, Sony's got that new tool out too.
Sony has one, Ari has one I'm very impressed with both of those now. And then lastly, our good colleague who can't be here, Tim Kang, and a lot of the work you guys did at Quasar, they use basically a white balance approximation approach where actually for most projects, unless you are among the most critical observers and critical technologists, just getting the white balance correct is probably good enough. And that's how pretty much all the broadcasts that you see today are being operated.
And we'll release a paper on that. We actually have it finished. We just need to publish it formally. So maybe end of the week or next week on that.
But that you also bring up a very valid point of contrast ratios in general. I mean, the contrast we can shoot in real life, and especially the data that you can capture on something like the Alexa 35, it's hard to shoot a really contrasty scene on a wall. It is a real problem, whether the camera's calibrated or not. So it is something you do have to sort of, if you're shooting plates, you definitely have to keep it in mind. But even if you're doing on reel, you have to keep those things in mind, because otherwise, the camera will receive so much data, but if your contrast ratio doesn't match.
There's implications with the image-based lighting as well. In these environments, you really want to control the spill of the light onto the wall. The black level of the wall is entirely dependent on spill light from elsewhere in the room, including when you have a spherical or a cylindrical wall. the wall spilling onto itself and then back and forth, and it bounces forever, and
And the reflectance percentages
But on a contrast ratio point, these LED displays are so bright and so black when they're off. They are truly high dynamic range devices. And so that's been a huge unlock in the last 5 or so years, coming from the broadcast industry and the rest of the industry finally catching up and having decent HDR standards. And we're really able to leverage those here to drive these walls at close to full bit depth, and have not horrendous data sizes or requirements on the server end. Back in the bad old days of trying to stretch an SDR signal that was really meant for 80 or 100 IRE up to 1,000, 1,500 nits or whatever, and 8-bit, you're stair-stepping all over the places. Like, your gradients are just awful. But now with these workflows, you can get smooth content all the way through. And like Tucker said, there's a lot of work being done by the processor manufacturers and the panel design to maintain the black level. Because again, traditional displays crushed the snot out of the black level, so all of the infrastructure along the way didn't really care how noisy those low-end details were, because the end device couldn't display them anyway. We can display them, and you can go look really closely at them, and they look awful. So having that capability now and having blacks go way down into the black is a huge improvement. So we're seeing big gains in that in the last couple of years.
All right, should we wrap it up here? Do we have one last question? No? No? Okay, one last question.
Would you rather have brights or darker darks? Today.
Don't you love your dithering?
I would rather have uniform off-axis reflectivity.
There's the answer.
So darker darks from whichever way you're looking
Brutal.
at it.
Brutal.
Instead of just on axis. Because again, in this environment, you guys are looking straight at this screen, but if you're simulating reality and you want to drag your camera off axis somewhere, you want that shadow to not shift as you're moving, and that's a physical thing. The brightness does tend to shift, but that's been worked on more by the display manufacturers, and really controlling for that black evenness regardless of which way you're looking is, again, a relatively recent endeavor.
Yeah, the future is bleak. The LED wall can cause overexposure and the vast majority of used camera settings. So we don't particularly need brighter LED walls. Maybe brighter ceilings, maybe brighter lights. But what we do need to keep up and to compete and to really fill out the dynamic range that's available in the camera is blacker blacks. Lower reflectance and more control of the light at the low end of the grayscales.
I will leave you with one last thing. Super bright lights tend to be hard sources as well, and these are not hard sources. True. It doesn't help to go much brighter because we're not able to do a pin spot with them, or any sort of, like, we can, from an image-based lighting perspective, we can have sun coming through trees that's getting mapped onto the wall, but it is not causing, a shadow, a beam pattern like a gobo would or something like that, right?
One stage I know maxes out at 600 nits because they don't want spillover or any other problems. They're just like, period, that's all I need. Not going over it. All right, well, this is fun finishing this up. Thank you.
Thanks so much.